12. Brutal Stoic Laws to build self-discipline and become unbreakable. What if the real reason your life feels chaotic, inconsistent, and undisciplined isn't lack of time, motivation, or opportunity, but the fact that you've been avoiding control your entire life? Think carefully. If you truly had self-discipline, would your days look like this? Would you wake up reactive, distracted, dependent on mood, waiting to feel ready before acting? Most people say they want discipline. What they actually want is comfort with results. And that contradiction is where their strength dies. Self-discipline didn't disappear by accident. It was trained out of you, replaced with stimulation, excuses, emotional reasoning, and the lie that feeling good matters more than acting right. The Stoics saw this collapse long before modern distractions existed. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while battling fatigue, illness, betrayal, and chaos, not by chasing motivation, but by mastering judgment. Here is the truth most people never face. A weak mind doesn't fail loudly. It leaks slowly, through inconsistency, through emotional reactions, through delayed decisions that feel harmless until years are gone. You don't lose discipline in one dramatic moment. You lose it by negotiating with yourself again and again and again. Stoicism does not care how you feel about this. It asks one brutal question: who is in command right now? Epictetus warned that a person ruled by impulses is not free. Nietzsche saw comfort as the silent architect of decay. Jung understood that what you refuse to discipline will eventually dominate you. Frankl proved that even in suffering, responsibility remains untouched. This video is not here to motivate you. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. These are not tips, they are laws. And laws do not negotiate with weakness. Across the next 12 Stoic principles, you will see exactly where your self-discipline collapses. Not to shame you, but to remove the illusion that something external is holding you back. If you are looking for reassurance, this is the wrong place. If you are ready to rebuild yourself from the inside out, stay, because once you understand how discipline is destroyed, you gain the power to make yourself unbreakable. If discipline feels rare today, it's not because people became weaker, it's because comfort became too available. Look around. Every impulse is rewarded, every discomfort is delayed, every excuse is socially accepted, and then people wonder why they can't control themselves. The Stoics understood something modern culture refuses to admit. Comfort is not neutral. It trains the mind to avoid effort, delay responsibility, and negotiate standards. Marcus Aurelius never asked how to feel better. He asked how to act correctly, even when the mind resisted. That difference is everything. A disciplined mind does not wait for alignment, it creates it. Here is where most people collapse. They treat discipline as a mood instead of a structure. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel motivated. They wait to feel inspired. And every time they wait, comfort wins. Seneca warned that ease makes the soul soft. Not evil, soft. And a soft mind cannot hold pressure. Pay attention to your own patterns. How often do you choose the easier option when no one is watching? How often do you delay a necessary action because it feels uncomfortable in the moment? That is not laziness, that is training. And the lesson being learned is submission to impulse. If this is hitting uncomfortably close, pause for a second. Don't scroll, don't distract yourself. Leave a comment with one word that describes where comfort has weakened you most. Writing it down is the first act of discipline. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort not to suffer, but to remember who was in control. Cold, hunger, silence, effort without applause, not punishment, preparation. Every time you choose comfort over command, discipline erodes quietly. Every time you choose resistance over relief, authority returns. This channel exists for one reason: to rebuild what comfort dismantled. If you want clarity instead of constant negotiation with yourself, subscribe now. Not for motivation, for structure, because discipline does not begin when life gets hard. It begins when you stop making it easy, and the next law will force you to confront something even more dangerous than comfort: your emotions. Most people believe their emotions are signals to be obeyed. The Stoics saw them as forces to be understood, then ruled. Here is the uncomfortable truth. If your emotions decide when you act, you do not have self-discipline. You have a schedule dictated by impulse. Anger tells you to react, fear tells you to delay, comfort tells you to quit early, and sadness tells you to withdraw. None of these emotions are evil, but none of them deserve command. Epictetus was clear: you are not disturbed by events, but by your judgment of them. That single distinction separates the disciplined from the reactive. Watch how discipline collapses in real life. Someone feels tired, so they skip training. They feel anxious, so they avoid the conversation. They feel unmotivated, so they delay the work. Each decision feels small. Together they build a mind that cannot be trusted. A disciplined mind does not ask, "How do I feel?" It asks, "What is required?" This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional hierarchy. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself, not affirmations. He didn't try to feel calm. He acted rationally despite turbulence. If this idea triggers resistance, pay attention. That resistance is the exact emotion trying to stay in control. Pause for a moment. Think about the last decision you postponed because of how you felt. Now ask yourself, who was in command at that moment? If this realization is landing, write one sentence in the comments: "I will not obey emotions that weaken me." Not for the algorithm, for accountability. Self-discipline begins the moment emotions lose voting rights. They can speak, they can warn, but they cannot decide. This channel is built for people who want command, not comfort. If you recognize yourself here, subscribe. Not to feel better, to act better, because the next law goes deeper than emotion. It exposes the quiet habit that keeps people weak while convincing them they are right. Most people don't lose discipline because life is hard. They lose it because life refuses to be fair. They work and aren't rewarded. They act correctly and are ignored. They suffer while others advance, and slowly something corrosive forms. Resentment. The Stoics rejected the idea of fairness as a foundation for strength, not because they were cynical, but because fairness creates expectation, and expectation creates collapse. Marcus Aurelius saw injustice daily. He did not ask life to justify itself. He asked how to respond without surrendering his character. Here is where discipline quietly breaks. When effort is tied to reward, when action depends on recognition, when endurance waits for fairness. A disciplined mind does not ask, "Is this fair?" It asks, "What is required of me now?" Schopenhauer understood that suffering intensifies when we argue with reality. Nietzsche warned that resentment grows when responsibility is avoided. The Stoics addressed both with a brutal stance. Life owes nothing. Power is taken through response. Notice how often discipline disappears after disappointment. The routine breaks, the standard lowers. The excuse sounds reasonable. Fairness becomes the justification for quitting. This does not mean you accept injustice passively. It means you do not let it govern your behavior. The moment you expect fairness, discipline becomes conditional. And conditional discipline is not discipline at all. Stoicism replaces fairness with agency, not because the world is kind, but because your response is still yours. If this feels harsh, it should, because comfort grows where fairness is expected, and the next law removes an illusion even more dangerous than injustice: the belief that control exists where it never has. An undisciplined mind wastes energy in the wrong places. It tries to control outcomes. It tries to manage people. It tries to predict the future. And when none of that works, it collapses into frustration. The Stoics drew a line that most people never draw, a hard boundary between what belongs to you and what never did. Epictetus reduced the chaos of life to a brutal simplicity. Some things are under your control, most things are not. Confuse the two, and discipline becomes impossible. Look closely at where your energy goes. Worry about opinions, anxiety about timing, anger toward people you cannot change. That is not awareness. That is leakage. A disciplined mind does not attempt to dominate reality. It governs response. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that external events are neutral until judgment interferes, not because events don't matter, but because surrendering control of response is the fastest way to lose authority. Most people exhaust themselves fighting what they cannot command. Then they claim discipline is hard. It is not hard. It is misplaced. Control does not live in results. It lives in preparation, in effort, in consistency. When you try to control outcomes, discipline turns into anxiety. When you control action, discipline turns into stability. This is why emotionally reactive people feel busy but achieve little. Their attention is scattered across variables that were never theirs. Stoicism does not promise certainty. It offers focus. Once your mind accepts that control is limited, discipline sharpens automatically. You stop arguing with reality. You stop waiting for conditions. You act where action is possible. If your discipline feels fragile, ask yourself one question: what am I trying to control that I never could? The answer will explain more than motivation ever did. And the next law strips away another comforting lie: the belief that discipline is built when life forces it on you. Most people believe discipline appears when life becomes hard. That pressure will force strength into existence. The Stoics knew the opposite was true. Pressure does not build discipline. It reveals the lack of it. When difficulty arrives unannounced, the untrained mind panics. It reacts emotionally. It improvises standards. It abandons structure. Not because the person is weak by nature, but because discipline was never practiced when it was optional. Seneca deliberately removed comfort from his life at times. Plain food, simple shelter, physical discomfort, not as punishment, as rehearsal. Voluntary hardship was not about suffering, it was about sovereignty. A disciplined mind does not wait to be tested, it tests itself. This is where modern thinking fails. People train only when motivated. They prepare only when afraid. They discipline themselves only when consequences are already visible. By then, it is too late. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal, and exhaustion with composure, not because he was exceptional, but because hardship was familiar. It had been invited long before it arrived. Comfort creates fragility. Not immediately, gradually. A mind that never practices restraint cannot suddenly enforce it. A body that never carries weight cannot suddenly endure it. A character that never resists impulse cannot suddenly command it. This is why discipline collapses under pressure. It was never trained under choice. Stoicism demands something uncomfortable: that you remove safety before life removes it for you, not dramatically, not heroically, quietly. Choosing effort when ease is available. Choosing silence when distraction is easier. Choosing structure when no one is watching. These moments feel insignificant. They are not. They are rehearsals for days when choice disappears. Discipline is not forged in crisis. It is exposed there. And the next law dismantles one of the most dangerous illusions of modern life: the belief that results are what give discipline meaning. Most people believe discipline exists to guarantee results. When results disappear, discipline follows. This is why effort collapses after failure, why routines break after disappointment, why consistency dies when recognition fades. The Stoics rejected outcomes as a source of authority, not because results are irrelevant, but because they are unreliable. Epictetus warned that tying your peace to outcomes places your mind at the mercy of chance. A disciplined life cannot be built on what is uncertain. Watch how fragile discipline becomes when results are delayed. The training stops, the work slows, the standards quietly lower. Not because the task lost value, but because validation disappeared. A disciplined mind does not work to be rewarded. It works because the action itself is correct. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the value of an act lies in its alignment with reason, not its applause. When effort depends on outcome, discipline becomes transactional, and transactions collapse under pressure. Modern thinking trains people to chase visible progress, likes, money, status, certainty. Stoicism trains something rarer, commitment without guarantee. This is where discipline becomes dangerous, when effort continues even after failure, when standards remain intact without reward, when the process is respected regardless of result. Detachment from outcomes is not apathy, it is focus. A mind that loves the process does not panic at delay. It adjusts, it persists, it remains intact. Most people quit not because they fail, but because they interpret failure as meaninglessness. Stoicism removes that interpretation. The work was never about the result. It was about the formation of the one doing it. Once outcomes lose authority, discipline stabilizes. You stop bargaining. You stop chasing, you act. And the next law introduces a force most people avoid until it is too late: mortality. Most people live as if time were abundant, as if delay had no cost, as if discipline could wait. The Stoics treated this belief as dangerous illusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote with death in mind, not to provoke fear, but precision. When time is assumed, standards loosen. When death is remembered, focus sharpens. Mortality strips away excuses faster than motivation ever could. Notice how indiscipline hides behind postponement. Tomorrow, next week, when things calm down, when life gives space. Death makes those phrases collapse. Seneca warned that it is not life that is short, but that we waste it. Wasted time is not neutral. It is the slow erosion of character. A disciplined mind does not rush, but it does not drift. Memento mori was not morbid reflection, it was behavioral correction. When the mind accepts that time is finite, priorities reorganize without effort. Distraction loses appeal. Trivial conflict loses gravity. Action becomes urgent without becoming frantic. Most people avoid thinking about death because it threatens comfort. Stoicism confronts it because it produces clarity. A life without awareness of mortality becomes careless. A life shaped by mortality becomes deliberate. Discipline strengthens when time is respected. You stop negotiating with impulse. You stop tolerating mediocrity. You stop waiting for permission to act. Death does not motivate. It clarifies. It asks a single question. If today were the last rehearsal, would your actions reflect command or avoidance? The Stoic does not answer with panic. He answers with alignment. And the next law removes the final dependency that destroys discipline, the need to be approved. Discipline collapses the moment behavior starts asking for permission. Most people believe they act independently. In reality, their standards rise and fall based on how they are seen. Praise sharpens effort. Criticism dissolves it. Silence makes it disappear. The Stoics saw this dependency as one of the most corrosive forces on character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to become a performer of virtue, not to act for recognition, but for alignment with reason. A disciplined mind does not seek applause. It seeks coherence. Approval creates a dangerous distortion. Actions become strategic instead of correct. Standards adjust to audience reaction. Integrity turns conditional. This is why discipline weakens when no one is watching. The external mirror disappears. The internal structure was never built. Nietzsche warned that those who live for approval eventually resent those who live by principle. Resentment becomes an excuse to abandon effort while preserving self-image. Stoicism cuts through this illusion cleanly. Virtue is not social, it is internal. A disciplined person does not ask whether an action will be praised. He asks whether it is consistent with the person he is becoming. When approval governs behavior, discipline becomes fragile. It inflates in public, it collapses in private. Freedom begins the moment external validation loses authority, not because others stop mattering, but because they stop commanding. This does not make you indifferent, it makes you sovereign. When standards are internal, discipline stabilizes. You no longer perform strength, you practice it, and the next law confronts the final illusion that keeps people weak while believing they are disciplined. The belief that identity is fixed. Most people believe discipline is a personality trait, something you either have or don't. That belief keeps them weak while sounding intelligent. The Stoics understood identity as behavior repeated under pressure. Not essence, not temperament, practice. When someone says, "I'm just not disciplined," they are not describing reality. They are defending a habit. Epictetus warned that character is revealed in choice, not intention. What you repeatedly do becomes who you are, regardless of how you explain it. A fixed identity protects the ego. If discipline is a trait, failure is not your responsibility. If discipline is trained, avoidance is exposed. This is why people cling to labels: lazy, creative, emotional, spontaneous. Each label is a boundary that excuses inconsistency. Stoicism rejects labels, it observes patterns. A disciplined identity is built through repetition of correct action, especially when resistance appears, not through self-talk, not through self-image. Jung understood this clearly. What you practice becomes autonomous. What you avoid becomes dominant. Every undisciplined impulse reinforced becomes future resistance. Every disciplined action repeated becomes future stability. Identity does not change when you decide. It changes when your behavior becomes predictable. This is uncomfortable because it removes the drama of transformation. There is no breakthrough, only training. The Stoic does not ask who he is, he asks what he does. When identity is understood as malleable, discipline becomes possible. You stop waiting to feel different. You act until difference appears. And the next law introduces the final consolidation. The moment discipline stops being effort and becomes command. At first, discipline feels like resistance, effort against impulse, structure against chaos. This is where most people quit. They mistake resistance for failure. The Stoics understood something subtle. Discipline is difficult only while authority is unstable. Once command is established, effort decreases. A disciplined mind does not argue with itself. It issues directives. Marcus Aurelius did not debate whether to act. He reminded himself what action required. The decision was already made. This is the shift most people never reach. They rely on willpower instead of command. Willpower exhausts. Command organizes. Command is built when standards stop being negotiable, when routines are protected from mood, when impulse is no longer consulted. This does not remove difficulty, it removes hesitation. A person under command still feels resistance. They simply no longer obey it. Stoicism treats discipline as governance. The rational mind rules. The impulses comply. This is why emotionally disciplined people appear calm under pressure, not because they feel less, but because command has been internalized. At this stage, discipline stops demanding attention. It becomes automatic, quiet, reliable. Most people never reach this point because they abandon training too early. They mistake early friction for incompatibility. But friction is proof that reorganization is happening. Once command is established, life simplifies. decisions shorten, standards stabilize, energy consolidates. The Stoics did not seek ease, they sought order. And the final laws will show what happens when discipline is no longer practiced occasionally, but embodied consistently. At this level, discipline is no longer about productivity, it is about character. The Stoics never treated discipline as optimization, they treated it as alignment with what is right. When discipline is only a tool, it collapses when convenience appears. When discipline is moral, it holds under pressure. Marcus Aurelius did not ask whether an action was efficient. He asked whether it was worthy of the person he intended to be. This distinction changes everything. A disciplined person does not behave correctly because it produces results. They behave correctly because deviation feels wrong. Erich Fromm warned that modern people confuse freedom with the absence of structure. Stoicism makes the opposite claim. Structure is what allows freedom to exist without chaos. When discipline becomes moral, excuses lose credibility. Rationalizations lose appeal. Shortcuts feel corrupt. This is why some people remain disciplined even when no consequence is visible. They are not chasing outcomes, they are protecting coherence. Discipline at this stage is not rigid, it is principled. It adapts without abandoning standards. It bends without breaking. Most people never reach this level because it demands something deeper than effort. It demands honesty. Honesty about weakness. Honesty about avoidance. Honesty about responsibility. Stoicism does not ask for perfection, it asks for integrity. When discipline is rooted in values, it becomes resilient. You no longer need reminders. Deviation feels unnatural, and the final law brings everything into a single posture, the Stoic IronMind. This is where discipline stops being practiced and becomes embodied. The Stoic IronMind is not aggressive, it is not loud, it does not prove itself, it governs. At this level, discipline no longer feels like effort because identity and action are aligned. There is no internal debate, no negotiation, no need for permission. Marcus Aurelius described this state simply: to live in agreement with nature, meaning reason governs impulse and action follows clarity. The iron mind does not eliminate emotion, it orders it. Fear still appears, fatigue still exists, doubt still speaks, but none of them command. Viktor Frankl showed that even when everything external is stripped away, responsibility remains untouched. The Stoic iron mind accepts this fully. No blame, no victimhood, only response. This is why disciplined people appear calm in chaos, not because they feel less, but because their inner structure does not collapse under pressure. At this point, discipline no longer feels heroic, it feels normal. You wake up and act. You face resistance without drama. You hold standards without performance. This is not superiority over others. It is sovereignty over yourself. Nietzsche warned that those who avoid discipline become resentful of those who embody it. Stoicism does not answer resentment. It ignores it. The iron mind does not argue with weakness. It replaces it. What you tolerate internally shapes what you become externally. When tolerance ends, strength stabilizes. This is not a transformation that happens in a moment. It is a posture you choose daily, quietly, relentlessly. You do not become unbreakable by hardening yourself against life. You become unbreakable by organizing yourself within it. If something in this video confronted you, that is not aggression, that is clarity. If something in this structure felt demanding, that is not cruelty, that is reality. The Stoic iron mind does not promise comfort. It offers command, and command is the foundation of freedom. Clarity over comfort, discipline over emotion. This is Stoic iron mind.